NOS4A2.
What is up, everyone, and welcome back to our NOS4A2 After Show, the show where we're breaking down the latest episodes of the AMC series NOS4A2 based off of the book by Joe Hill. I am one of your hosts, Griffin Schiller, and I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Mr. Mike Johnson, a.k.a. Real School. Mike, how's your weekend been?
Hey, not bad. Busy, man. Busy,
Yeah.
But, I'm glad we can work this out, and I'm always going to make time for this show, and we can talk a little more NOS4A2, so looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to first start off by saying, I am blown away by the reception of the first episode. I did not expect you guys to enjoy it as much as you did, but I guess you have, and so that's very encouraging for us to hear. So thank you, anyone who watched that episode, liked that video, shared it, etc. Hopefully we don't let you down in our coverage of this show, because I think we're both kind of, we like it. We're kind of mixed on some elements, but the most important thing is we love the source material. And as I've been kind of listening through the audiobook, I've really come to enjoy it. I'm about over halfway done, so it's crazy. I've just been blowing through it. But let's get into this episode. Tonight's episode. This is episode number 2, The Graveyard of What Might Be. Basically, how this whole thing works is Mike's gonna kind of give us, go through the episode by plot points, and we're gonna stop and kind of talk about some of the stuff that was interesting, and then kind of give our overall thoughts as we get to the end of the show. So let's dive into this thing. Mike, let's start talking about The Graveyard of What Might Be.
Well, see, that's perfect that you bring up the title of the episode, because I think the first thing we really want to discuss is how much more of the world of Manx that we get to see in this episode. Because in the first one, we hear all about Christmas Town. We see perhaps what his MO is when it comes to stealing these poor lost children, to how he transforms them, how he lives off of them, how he's a succubus and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, and we see his first assistant, who of course was responsible for two deaths in the beginning, right, with the needles and everything, and kind of sets up one of our subplots. But as we know in the first episode, that guy gets thrown out of a car and he gets killed.
Yeah.
So I think the real crux of this episode is Manx is looking for a new henchman, so to speak. And that brings us to the guy that we met in the first episode, who Vic is kind of friends with at the school, the custodian there. What do you remember his name, Griffin?
Yeah, Bing. Yeah.
Bing. Perfect. There you go. So we see Bing. We get to know him a little bit more, and he actually sees an ad in the comic that Vic gives him in the first episode about Christmas Town.
Yeah. And real quickly, before you go any far, this part that we're talking about right here, it's one of my favorite parts in the book that I've gotten to this far, I think, just because of how creepy and horrifying it is. And we'll touch on that just here in a few minutes, but needless to say, I think the show kind of drops the ball a bit on it, but
they kind of missed it. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, a little bit. But let's just describe the scene we're talking about. Yeah.
So Bing actually writes a letter to Christmas Town because he wants to work
Land,
there.
Just want to correct you because I know people in the comments are going to go crazy. So.
I'm thinking of, I guess it's Nightmare Before Christmas is stuck in my head.
Yeah, well, it's Christmas Town sounds a little bit better than Christmas Land.
True.
I think
Christmas Land. But you're absolutely right. So I apologize to our audience. Christmas Land. He writes a letter to Christmas Land because he wants to work there. Types it up on a good old fashioned typewriter, sends it in, and immediately there's a kind of supernatural response, right? So once he supposedly sends this letter, we are kind of knee deep in this really creepy dream sequence for about a minute in the show. And as Griffin said, it's a very dark, creepy tone within the book. This is the moment that I was talking to Griffin about before we went on the air, where I said this show almost lost me with this specific moment, because if you don't know the source material, or if you're not sure what to expect, there's that scene where all of a sudden the moon that has Manx's face on it kind of smiles and winks at Bing. And I had again, and I read this book so long ago that didn't really remember this scene. And it's one of those moments where you just go, what did we? Oh, right. I remember that. But I had no idea what to expect. And it almost took me out. It was a little goofy. Would you agree with that?
I would completely agree. And I don't know whether it's a lack of budget or just a poor design or just, Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was just like how it wasn't, drawn out as much as it should have been. But like when it got to the whole moon thing and we see Manx's face on there, it was really goofy. And the stuff with the kid and him in the basement after he like goes up and he sees his parents kind of like dancing with the Christmas music and the tree going on I was like that could have been a lot scarier than it really was. They could have really built the tension for that. And then when his dad starts to like come after him and he goes down in the basement, I was like, okay, like what's kind of going on here? This isn't really as intense as it should be. And then he gets into the basement and the kid is there. And it starts to get a little bit back on track just because that kid is so creepy. Now forgive me. I know I've just kind of been like listening to the audiobook and I may not remember correctly, but I don't think that kid was in the book, for that particular dream sequence. Was he?
Oof, not that I remember.
Yeah.
I do remember the parents. Yeah,
I remember the stuff with the parents, and it was really focused on like him and his childhood traumas and stuff like that. Right. So when the kid kind of comes in and hands him the letter and is like, "Hey, and they start talking about Christmas Land. I'm like, all right, I like this, but I really think that was a missed opportunity to focus on Bing and kind of like his childhood a little bit, because that ultimately that dream was really important for the character, and then obviously the climax with the moon just wasn't it didn't do anything for me, and that's the second time a potentially really creepy sequence wasn't creepy. I mean, we were talking last week about the opening sequence with Manx, and that they really it was a missed opportunity to make that a punctual statement, a really creepy statement, but they don't. It's just kind of like, it's not like poorly done. It's just kind of, it is what it is. And then we get to this one and it's like, this is one of the, like, for me at least, this was a huge highlight in the book just because of how descriptive Hill was and for how long it seemed to go on. And it just, it was goofy by the end of it, unfortunately. Yeah,
it must be. It's one of those things that I think tonally maybe can't carry over in terms of medium. Because
and I was wondering about that. I was like, is it just a matter of translation? Is it just because of the stuff in the book is like, it's not goofy, but it's like I feel like it is hard to kind of translate that on screen, the dream sequence and stuff. But I mean, we've seen it done before. Yeah, so I don't know. It's weird.
Could have been done different. Yeah, it's interesting too because, I think from Hill's writing, and we talked a little bit last week about how he definitely obviously takes little bits of what his father's done and kind of changes them into it. There's definitely kind of a dynasty with those two generations of, kings, if you want to call them that. And I think what Hill does differently, which I actually like, is he latches on to that macabre kind of, like you said, there's a thin line of humor there, which his father does in a lot of his works. Like his father is almost akin to Hitchcock. You know how Hitchcock said Psycho was a black comedy, right? And a lot of normal people would be like, well, that's not the funniest movie in the world. But
right, it's like you got to twist the sense of humor, but
right, exactly. So I think King, in a sense, Hill really kind of grabs onto that. So that scene, I think with television, like you said, doesn't translate well. But I think even within the book and some of the other stuff I've read that he's done, there is that kind of quirkiness to it. You know what I mean? Like they set up their own worlds and they all have their own rules. And, it's just one of those things that it's kind of a ride, right? And so I think you're absolutely right. It just didn't translate well. But that moment was pretty important, like you said. And I think because it didn't translate well, that's the first time I really backed away from this show, where I just went, okay, what are we doing here?
Yeah,
and then you said, it does get back on track, which is good. So.
It does about maybe like halfway through the episode or so. But the other thing is I think this episode in particular really should have focused on Bing himself, because they do focus on him to an extent, but once again, it's just part of the Manx storyline, and so we're cutting back and forth between that, Vic, and then Maggie in was it Wisconsin or Iowa?
Right.
And in the book, there's like a series of chapters that focuses solely on Bing, and so we really get to understand him and like his past, and why he's like so easily like lured in by Manx. I never got a sense of that desperation of him wanting to go to Christmas Land that I got in the book. Now, once again, like I said, not everything translates to screen perfectly, but with a series like this, which is I believe their intention is to go for a few seasons or so. Why not take an episode and devote it to a character who is so important to the plot? I think that, and usually the episodes in series like this, especially when you have 10 episodes, you there's a little bit of give there. When we have series like look at Westworld or Game of Thrones that focus on a singular character and we get to really know them and such, they're usually a standout just because of how tight the storytelling is, how contained, how you don't have to worry about any of the other plot lines going on. And I think that this would have been the perfect opportunity to really double down on that and allow us to understand Bing as a person, because he's a complex character, because he thinks that he is doing the right thing, but we all know that he's not, and it's kind of seeing Manx's effect on him. I never really got that in the show, so that was very disappointing. Especially that car ride, the car ride that they take together in the book, it lasts much longer, and in this, it feels like they kind of just breeze over it. Like Manx says a few words here or there, he drinks the Coke, and he passes out. Once again, it could be just a matter of when you're reading it, everything's more descriptive, and then when you see it on film, it happens much quicker. But I don't know. I really think that this episode should have the sole focus should have been on Bing and kind of Manx luring him in.
Yeah. It could be a question of, will they do it later? Will we see more of Bing's backstory? Right. Or poor organization. I think you're absolutely right. It almost feels like if this were the third or fourth episode, that they could have afforded to do that a little bit more. So, I mean, if it's okay with you, I think I'll discuss what the rest of the episode, the other subplot is. Let's kind of move past it,
because there's a lot else that goes on that doesn't pertain to Bing. Yeah.
And this is it goes hand in hand with what you were saying, because we see a lot more of Vic and her bridge, right? And how her powers are starting to amplify already. Take her further, take her to places she hasn't been, draw her to different sources of power. Because we talked about in the first episode, obviously, we meet several individuals who have this kind of shining, these mental powers, right? So we do see it start to grow significantly. And I think, as we had kind of mentioned, if they had shifted the Bing stuff to maybe the third episode, maybe built it up just a little, so they could afford to do that, they could have really focused on Vic in this one, I think.
I agree. That was I completely agree. Maybe have Vic have like one or two more interactions with Bing somehow. Like, it doesn't happen in the book, but like if they had maybe taken a creative liberty and had like a few just encounters, so it's like, oh, that guy, just kind of plant the seed so that when we get to an episode 3 or 4, we have that sole episode focused on that individual. Yeah, that would have been perfect, because definitely I think the most interesting stuff in this episode was, once again, Vic and her discovering her powers with the shorter way, and her brief interaction with Maggie was good. I struggle with the character of Maggie in general in the show, but anyways, I can continue though.
No, I think that's perfect, because you're absolutely right. And this is kind of, I think, the one real takeaway from this episode is the two of them meet for the first time.
Yeah, that's the big thing. It doesn't even happen until like the end almost, though. It's really weird.
Also true. Yeah. We see. So, yeah, that is interesting. There's more buildup, but buildup that's not necessary. And then the things that they should have built up, they didn't have. Right. So, it came interesting.
Yeah, I did feel like this episode meandered just a little bit, like the stuff with Vic and going to her father and seeing his
mistress,
thank you, and then the mom coming, like, oh, it's building up that kind of that like bad domestic life that she's had, and the relationship struggles she's had with her parents. She really is. She can't be with her dad anymore. She can't be with her mom anymore because all this stuff is going on. And so I mean, like that's good, but at a certain point, I want the story to kind of progress and go somewhere else, and I kind of felt like we hit a point here, and they're just kind of elaborating it more without moving the plot forward. And so for me, I thought the pacing suffered, especially during the middle.
Yeah, for sure. No, absolutely right. And I think, okay, this is good. This is why we play well off of one another, because it's so true that when you think about how Bing is portrayed in the book and how, one of the motifs of the book is really about lost things, right? And we kind of touched on that with the first kid, and they have a line where they say, he's a lost child, and we know that Vic is a lost child. So we see how truly lost she is, because you're right, that scene that we have with, she's trying to get along with, her dad's new girlfriend, trying to be, kind of genuine, trying to still love him. And we see how sometimes dad isn't right, even though he was supposed to be kind of a sympathetic character, even though he was abusive. Like, it's a very odd mix. So we do start to see that Vic really feels lost. And that's the moment where obviously she takes the bridge and she goes even further, right? But you're right, because if you think about how Bing is treated and how he is a lost child, in a sense, in a lot of ways as well, that would have been a really good parallel to start building. But you're right, because it was so rushed and because we don't see enough with Bing or how Manx can really manipulate him, then that moment is kind of lost, right?
Yeah, it's really weird, because it's like they're rushing the important things or the stuff that would be really interesting, but then they're dragging out the stuff that they don't need to drag out. Because, I mean, ultimately, this... I could see this show lasting like maybe like 2 or 3 seasons or something like that. The book's like it's meaty, it's a decent length, but it's not the longest thing ever. And so like you could take your time to do stuff, but they're focusing on the wrong stuff to kind of dive into a little bit, and then they're not developing like you said, like the parallels between the two, like stuff that you can do in a film that. Or not in a film, in a television show, in a visual medium that would be more effective than what you can do in a book. And you can really like emphasize that kind of parallel between the two.
Absolutely right. Yeah. So unfortunately, we have that moment, as we discussed with Maggie and Vic, where, and wouldn't you agree, you've kind of seen it before, haven't you? When we have this sci-fi world, when we have people with powers or something we don't expect, you have the one character who's explaining it, and you have the other character who does your kind of stereotypical response that is supposed to mirror how the audience feels, which is like, oh, okay, well, thanks for your time, but I'm going to get out of here because I don't really believe in this stuff, right? You've seen it so many times. And you're right, it is kind of just grazed out, like just flies right by.
Well, and the other thing is I just really don't like the way they're portraying Maggie for some reason. She just... I mean, Vic shows up, Maggie's there, and then like it just kind of becomes like a blah 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 blah. She's just like throwing words out. It's like, oh yeah, I knew you were gonna come. This is the whole thing that we've been planning for. That I've been planning for this the whole time. So I'm gonna take you back from it. And there's like, you don't get a minute to breathe. We don't get like good character moments between the two. And Maggie's supposed to have a pretty severe stutter, because when she uses her abilities, it ever since she discovered them, it has caused this speech impediment. And we don't hear her stutter until she literally tells Vic, oh, I have a stutter. And then she like makes a really noticeable stutter. And I was just kind of like, really, guys, come on. That's pretty late. Like, you could have, I don't know, maybe it's just a matter of casting. Maybe they could have cast someone better to really like sell that. But I feel like, because Vic, every time we see Vic use the shorter way, we clearly visibly see her eye get affected. So this is definitely a thing that happens. But when we see Maggie use her abilities, she does have a stutter.
Yeah.
So it's just like you're kind of contradicting yourself here in terms of the rules of the world, which you did not do in the book. So that to me was just really puzzling, and that whole sequence was just nothing. It was just really nothing. It was exposition, it was world building, it was making Vic aware of the Wraith and all of that stuff, but ultimately you're right, it was something we've seen before. She's like, well, you're crazy, I'm gonna get out of here. And so
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you can just pretty much predict what's going to happen the next time they meet, right? So Vic's going to have a moment where all of a sudden something happens to her and she goes, oh, I better go talk to Scrabble Lady. And she's going to take the shorter way. And then she's going to like, okay, teach me all about this stuff. There's going to be a moment, right?
Definitely. It could very well be next episode. Who knows?
Absolutely.
But, yeah. Anyways, I guess moving forward with the rest of the episode. Yeah.
Well, the really cool thing I think about just near the end of the episode is, again, we don't necessarily see Christmas Land, but we do see, what's the title of the episode?
The Graveyard of What Might Be.
Which is arguably the creepiest thing we've seen in the show so far.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah.
And I think the guy who plays Bing, the actor, I think he's doing quite well in that role.
Yeah, I think
the
actor is right. I think for the most part, the acting across the board, aside from Maggie, is pretty good. I definitely, speaking of Bing and Manx, I thought Quinto was much better in this episode. I actually really liked the scenes between him and Bing. That's another reason why I would have liked more time devoted to them, an entire episode. Especially during the graveyard stuff. I loved that. That was definitely, I agree with you. It's the best stuff, not only because it was the creepiest stuff, but because I thought Quinto, we got to see a little bit more of who Manx is, and like he's like, well, I couldn't save these people, and so I have to save them and take them back to Christmas Land, and so he's kind of indoctrinating Bing, and so that was I felt it there more so than I had the entire episode.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, because we talked about it last week where we said, the older Manx character, we felt Quinto might be kind of chewing up the scenery a little bit, doing that voice that kind of once again takes you out of the reality a little. But when he's younger Manx, or at least middle age, whatever you want to call him, he's deliciously twisted, and he can definitely manipulate people, and we see that with Bing, which is great. So like you said, he got he got many more moments in this episode where you could see that kind of charm that I think that Hill brings to this succubus, right? Because it plays off of that kind of archetypal vampire character where they are supposed to be charming. They're supposed to lure you, right?
Look, just look at Dracula. When he's bringing in, I forget the guy's name. Keanu Reeves in the Francis Ford Coppola
Jonathan Harker.
Harker. Yes, it had to be a John. Of course, Keanu Reeves only plays characters named John.
That's right.
But that's the one that pops to mind. Gary Oldman when he's trying to or Bela Lugosi when he's trying to bring in Jonathan Harker. So we definitely saw a little bit of that with Quinto there. Yeah,
but you're right. And so if we get to the graveyard, the great visuals, because you see the kids trapped under the ice, right? And it's quite shocking. And again, the guy who plays Bing really plays off, I think, genuine shock and hurt, and I think he's such a sympathetic character that you can't help but feel what he's feeling, and he's looking at these kids, and he's kind of a gentle soul, and he sees them, and Manx just twists him. It says, oh, don't you want to help me save the rest of them? And you're it's one of those moments where, again, I think good writing, especially with antagonists, happens when you can relate to anybody, right? And if you can relate to an antagonist, even though the guy is an evil, immortal succubus, you kind of go, man, if I were Bing, I'd want to save those kids too, right? Like you're in it. So it was definitely the best moment, I think, of the first two episodes for me anyways. And like I said, when we had that moment with the moon and I was really just pulled away and I'm going, okay, what's the show going to bring us? The end of this episode brought me right back into it. I think more than the first episode, right? So like you said, there's pacing issues and stuff like that. But that end scene was really well done.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, all I can do is just echo what you've said before. This was this was, to me, this was the highlight of the episode. Is the highlight of the first 2 seasons. As much as I love the character drama between Vic and her parents in that first episode, this one didn't really do it for me. So thankfully, the stuff with Manx at the end really brought it back up, and I am looking forward to what comes in season 3, or I'm sorry, not season 3, episode 3. But yeah, overall, it was an episode. You know, that's kind of what I'm gonna. They built the world up a little bit more. We got to see Vic use her powers, saw the interaction with Maggie, got a little bit more in-depth look at Manx and Bing and what's gonna become of their partnership. But overall, it was just a fine episode. I'd probably give it like a 6 out of 10 or something like that. I think maybe even like a 6 out of 10 is about right. I didn't think it was terrible, but like, the stuff at the beginning really just it didn't sit right with me, and then it took basically the whole episode for it to get back on track.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, spot on. Because, it comes down to, as we talk about writing a little bit more, things that I've said when I've reviewed a film in the past is that you talk about convenience in writing and that suspension of disbelief of when something super convenient just kind of comes right up and pushes the story forward just for the sake of the story moving forward. That to me is lazy writing. And while the end of the episode didn't have that, and why it's the best moment, there are so many moments like that, like you said at the beginning, that family drama, and you think like, oh, maybe Vic can kind of make this work with the girlfriend, and then the mom just comes like right into it, and then you're like, okay, because we need something to get Vic out of there,
use her powers,
and same thing, we get the dream sequence with Bing, and I think better writing could have cut it off there and said, okay, let's save something for episode 3.
Even,
absolutely,
and I'm not saying the direction here is bad. I don't think the direction has been bad for the first 2 episodes at all. I think there are some moments where the shots are great. They're well composed. They're well lit and everything. But I think there are other moments where I'm like, well, you could have been a little bit more creative with that in order to really immerse the audience and get them to feel something. I guess the best word I can use to describe the direction overall is kind of unremarkable,
Yeah, it's nothing special yet.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, in a lot of ways. And I think, to be honest, I'm not really sure who directed the first 2 episodes or, throughout the series. But you're right. It's just middle of the road, kind of safe in a lot of senses, right? Like things just, even the way they're shot. Yeah, it's just what you would do to portray whatever's happening in kind of the safest way, right? There's nothing shocking or...
Which is kind of weird for a story like this. I feel like they'd want to take some creative chances and go that extra mile to really sell what's going on and create and make this a full-on like genre show, Because people love a good horror show, especially if you can create that atmosphere. And I feel like this one, it's not committing. It really needs to commit in the latter half of the season, the next couple episodes, because they're missing out on the atmospheric scares that the book has. Yeah,
and I saw kind of some of the comments that. Our viewers had left and that you had actually interacted with them, and you had said to one of them, it's a very slow burn, the book, right? It's so you wonder, is this a slow burn? Because there were a lot of people in the comments from our last episode who were saying it was a little too slow. Like, this is a horror show. It's kind of what we discussed. Go for the scare factor, like hook that audience first, and then you can build a little bit. But you're right. Like, these 2 episodes have been kind of a slow burn, and part of me was like, okay, so when's the rest of the stuff?
Eventually you have to hook your audience. If you cannot hook your audience within the first 2 episodes, that is problematic. And I think
you're in trouble.
They've kind of done the bare minimum. I honestly, I understand if people would just want to jump ship right now. It's not like the most exciting thing on television. I am still interested to see where it goes, just because of like I am listening to the book, and I really dig the stuff that I'm getting in there, and I want to see it translated well. But I think it's almost too much of a slow burn for its own good at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, there you have it, guys. Those are our thoughts on NOS4A2 Season 1, Episode 2, The Graveyard of What Might Be. Be sure to let us know your thoughts and opinions on this episode down in the comments section below. As Mike already mentioned, we do read them, we do interact with you, and maybe we'll start featuring what some of you guys say on previous episodes just to kind of break down interesting points. So definitely let us know your thoughts and opinions down there as well. For those of you, if you are new to the show, we understand that the entire season of this show is available on AMC Premiere, but we are going to be releasing these episodes weekly because that's how AMC will be airing them on TV. So if you do not have AMC Premiere, you can watch along, you can watch the episode, come back and watch our recap of the show. But as always, thank you, Mike, for joining me. Where can everyone find you?
Well, you can find me over at Real School, the best kept secret on YouTube. That's Real, R-E-E-L. It's a stupid pun. Forgive me, but go check out the channel. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Real School, or Instagram is real.school. But yeah, anything that's Real School related, you can find me there.
A lot of real and
yes.
Schools. In that little plug there.
You got to repeat the name, man.
You got to keep going.
Get
It's
it
repetition. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
But as always, guys, be sure to like this video, share with your friends, and subscribe to this channel for more movie reviews, television reviews, and other entertainment-related content on a weekly basis. You can like Men vs. Movies on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter simply by searching Men vs. Movies. And lastly, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right. That's going to do it for this recap of NOS4A2 Episode 2, and we'll catch you next week. Take care.